News and views right here on Salam Media with myself, Salaila Makudiri, and we're going to be quickly turning our attention to a rather dramatic escalation in South Asian geopolitics. Pakistan's recent declaration that following the breakdown of peace talks, it may seek to listen to this obliterate the Taliban government in neighboring Afghanistan. The warning comes amid deepening border conflicts, mutual accusations of sanctuary and sabotage, and a rapidly deteriorating trust between the two. And joining us now to unpack the legal, religious, and global political implications of the statement is Professor Junaid Ahmad. He's a distinguished scholar in the fields of law, religion, and global politics, and he has written widely on the intersection of militant Islamist movements, state responses, and international normative orders. Professor Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. I really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Assalamu alaikum. Always wonderful to be with you.
No, pleasure is all ours. I think let's jump right into it. Just to set the scene, how should we interpret Pakistan's use of a very, very strong word, obliterate, in this context? Is this simply rhetorical escalation, as we've seen a few times, or a credible signal of intent, especially given Pakistan's historical relationship with the Taliban and other militant actors within the region?
Well, the first thing to note is it seems like the Pakistanis have plagiarized from President Donald Trump, who used the exact same word when he bombed Iranian nuclear sites, and he said he's obliterated all of them, which of course was just bombast. So that's the first thing that the word obliterate, evokes in my mind. But beyond that, this is becoming a what you can say a tragic comedy. This whole thing going on between Pakistan and the Taliban government in Afghanistan, and specifically the Pakistani military. For our viewers, that I'm sure I'm probably insulting their intelligence, but it's kind of a very simple story in that sense. The 1980s, our viewers will know there was this the jihad in Afghanistan against the Soviets, and in that war, and people often confuse these things. The group known as the Mujahideen, whether they were Afghans or Muslim fighters from elsewhere, were involved in that struggle to oust the Soviets. They accomplished that mission with the help of with the United States, Saudi Arabia, and especially the Pakistani military intelligence apparatus. Now, afterwards, you had a lot of these people still in the area, and what Pakistan has always attempted to do is to obtain a friendly regime in Kabul, in Afghanistan, because as all our viewers know, the real enmity in South Asia is between Pakistan and India. India has always been the major rival. So, Pakistan on this side at least wanted a friendly regime just in case. So I mean, it's not like they gambled on anything. At that period, it was the Taliban was virtually created and established by the Pakistani military intelligence apparatus, and that was because we often forget Talib students. These were young
Mm-hmm.
students. These were the young students in the madrasas and so on. I mean, exploited horribly for geopolitical purposes. But these were not the same mujahideen from the 80s. Some of them maybe, but the majority of them were students, many of them orphans, and that then became the Taliban, which then in 94 to 96, that civil war period was horrible. They finally took power because the Afghans welcomed at least some order in the country. And of course, we know that was not a pleasant time. And then fast forward to 2001. So the point I want to make there is that at that stage, one can firmly say that yes, the Taliban were a direct creation of the Pakistani military intelligence apparatus. After 2001, this group has formed and it's getting more momentum, even though it's technically overthrown by the American invasion, but it's getting more momentum because, as our former Prime Minister Imran Khan said, and many of us agreed with, is that these types of military solutions to these problems are not I mean, not only what do they have immense quote unquote collateral damage, that is civilian deaths and casualties, but they're also counterproductive. They fuel more militancy, more recruits come within that group. So the US spent what, $2 trillion to remove the Taliban, only for the Taliban to come back in 2020. But this time, this Taliban, what they often say 2.0, it did not need the type of assistance and help that it got from the Pakistanis before.
Mm,
One, because this was the constant complaint during the war on terror years. The United States, it was this bizarre relationship with Pakistan. Pakistan is a major non-NATO ally, but it's also playing a double game and giving shelter and harboring, which it probably was to some of these. But there was nothing like the support and military and finances of the 1990s. So the Taliban did take on their own flavor. They were no longer, and they themselves no longer wanted to be perceived as mere puppets of the Pakistanis, while the Pakistanis still consider them to be so. We created you.
mm,
And so they come to government, and initially this is under Imran Khan. And Imran Khan, I mean, we forget this, out of the entire political spectrum in Pakistan. In case folks don't know, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, he was ousted in a regime change operation, still the most popular public figure and politician in the country by far, but is rotting in a jail because all the powers that be don't want him there. But he has always been a pacifist. He's in
mm,
that sense that negotiations, these things require political solutions. Every other party in the Pakistani political spectrum, and God knows we know about the United States and NATO, everything they see, there has to be a military solution to it. And so now once again we see, the Taliban, no, the Pakistani accusation is that, well, some of those bad Taliban, because this was very obvious to all of us that, the Pakistani state has kind of designated the good Taliban that can be used strategically for its purposes in Afghanistan and especially in Kashmir as well, and the bad Taliban that are no longer following orders
mm,
from the 1990s. And so, while the good Taliban supposedly took power in Afghanistan, they are not, in Pakistani view, taking sufficient action against the bad Taliban that has been since the beginning, years of the war on terror after 2001, really picked up steam after 2005. They began to not only target the U.S., NATO, and Afghanistan, but also Pakistani security military installations, because the Pakistanis, or General Musharraf and the Pakistani elite, chose the decision to participate in America's war on terrorism, reluctantly,
mm,
whatever it may be. But that also then entailed Pakistan being forced to conduct military operations in its own country in the Northwest. And this, of course, you can imagine, alienated so many. And it's important to remind the viewers that this is an area, the northwest of Pakistan and the tribal areas, the border is very porous, and there's Pashtuns on one side and Pashtuns on the other side. It's an artificial kind of the Duran line, they call it, from
mm,
colonial days. But one of the problems right now with the people are all thinking about in kind of like really ideological things, that, well, their ideology is this. Well, that's, the Pakistani elites and rulers have played around with all ideologies for their purposes. One of the things that we often overlook is precisely what I was talking about, the very primordial kinship ties between these Pashtuns,
mm,
whether they're on the Pakistani side or the Afghan side. And so when the Pakistanis say undertake these huge military operations, I'm not saying that the Pakistanis are always wrong about that there may be this and that. But for the Taliban government in Kabul, it's also negotiating with people who are their extended family, tribes, and this. So that complicates things even further. But I mean, you read the statement right now from the
mm,
Pakistanis. They are it's not just that they are feeling some of the pain of some attacks that are supposedly taking place by the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan from Afghan soil into Pakistan, but I think they are incredibly irate that how dare a force that we created, a force that
mm,
was supposed to remain our puppets, is now, making its own, conducting its own foreign policy, visiting India. I mean, of all places. So it also marks really rapid. I mean, we think about these things, but really rapid geopolitical shifts taking place in South Asia, with them going to India, U.S. coming back to Pakistan, threatening to take over Bagram Air Base.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things going on there, and I think that the Pakistanis are one of the reasons why they are very happy about courting the United States is because they're so angry at the Taliban that they may ask the United States, help us now fight the Taliban. And the irony, just it's so comical, because the same accusation that the United States leveled against Pakistan throughout the war on terror years, you're harboring terrorists, you're whatever, you're not really helping, you're actually harboring them. And if you listen to the rhetoric from from Islamabad and the generals, it's like it's a mirror image of what it was then. These guys are harboring terrorists. We have to go after them. Same story.
No, very, very same story. And I think that's what's slightly comical about it. But just your final, remarks, looking ahead, Prof, especially in the next 3 to 6 months, should we say, in your view, what markers should indicate that Pakistan is preparing for military action versus markers that suggest diplomacy may still prevail in that part of the world?
Right. I don't think most of us think that there's going to be some type of full-scale obliteration taking place in Afghanistan by Pakistan, if for nothing at all. If great empires can be defeated, so who are the Pakistanis? But I think that we're living in a different world in which the Taliban still really isn't considered a nation state, like a head of a nation state with a full military army. So, but that actually makes it more difficult, right? I mean, in conventional military wars for countries like the United States, etc., it's easier to actually deal with these groups that are very much rooted in society as insurgencies. As much as the Israelis can conduct their genocide in Palestine, Hamas isn't going away. It's still there, and in fact, probably strengthened. So, so I don't see that type of a full-scale invasion. I mean, that'll be complete humiliation for the Pakistanis if they. I think you'll continue to see these types of drone strikes, air strikes, while supposedly diplomacy was going on. So early on, we really did think that okay, there was some breakthrough in Qatar, but that kind of fell apart. Then they go to Istanbul, and so. I think that right now, like I said, it makes no sense unless one understands the history, and then the kind of animosity that these Pakistanis feel, that, like, we've supported you, and then now you have to do everything for us, whereas the Taliban are meeting with the Russians on their own, the Chinese on their own, the Indians on their own. And so I do think that yes, diplomacy will continue. Pakistan has enough problems on its hands, but I also think that the intrigue, the geopolitical intrigue in this region, we talked about the great game, that is like exacerbating and compounding all of these different forces. And the one last thing I'll say is that the Taliban have some legitimate criticisms of now the Pakistanis, who, along with maybe some other countries, are supporting ISIS type characters. So not only, I mean, that war has been going on even before the Americans left. I mean, people don't think about Taliban were at war not even really with the Americans by that point, with ISIS elements in Afghanistan. And because it had made promises to China and all these countries, we will not allow terrorists here. So one of the accusations is that there are a lot of forces coming, ISIS from also from Balochistan, etc., into Afghanistan. So that now there's this back and forth, which only diplomacy can solve. But we also know that particularly the Pakistanis and many of these countries, that's often the second option. The military option is first, and it never works.
No, most definitely, Professor Junaid Ahmed. Really appreciate your time and for your wonderful insights. Hope we chat again.
Absolutely, it was wonderful being with you.
There you go. Going to take a quick break.